This video is sponsored by Crimson Manifesto, Knuckles OX, Zach Haji, Jopi, and Baba Snake. We resume as Bardock faces off with Demon King Piccolo, who, mistaking Bardock's confused and thoughtful demeanor for a glued state of awe, continues on with his braggadocious monologue. As this is the first time since his return, his terror inspired the rightful reverence, inspiring him to let more of his power come unrestrained in the process, whilst gloating about finishing up this light work quick so he can go absorb Kami and resubjugate the world. Smugly, the great ruler decides to let the Saiyan invader in on his secret, letting Kami's champion know he, Piccolo, was gifted some special treatment of his own, as a result of the one called Monito, with that being to receive a wish from the so-called god of Earth himself, allowing him to restore his youth and full power, as well as even getting access to the old Kaja's true greatest secret weapon, one Kami does not even trust his precious champion enough to know, which has allowed him to achieve greater strength than the unobtainable dark power he already possessed when he was sealed by the full leader of the martial artist Mutaito during his previous war for the planet. As he closely regards his target, however, Piccolo feels a sudden shock in the air that finally shuts him up, snapping his gaze and attention back to the monkey man completely, and allowing him to recognize some disturbing things, primarily that this lowly animal is nowhere near as immobilized by fear as he presumed, having clearly made quite brazen strides towards the exit of the haunted house in a showing of what can only be called disinterest. Secondly, that he had stopped just before exiting, his ears quickly pricking up at the concept of a weapon or tool he doesn't know about, that could be used to further his own dreams of vengeance, aligning not quite a fighting spirit, but something far worse. And finally, he realizes that old sly fox Kami set him up for failure, as the immense key bubbling up from the alien in front of him is immeasurably greater than what it was when he peered down at him from the lookout, thinking he was just an earthling thanks to his convincing guise. This is not a humble country bumpkin martial arts folk hero named Bruce Chun, but something far worse than even him, as he's foolishly challenged the retired conqueror of worlds and Saiyan warrior Bardock, who is a completely different animal, one who holds back neither his intentions, ambitions, or power. As an oppressively violent and greedy energy emits from the former Frieza Force soldier, he turns back to face the so-called evil Namekian, with evident interest in his wording of a weapon he doesn't know of, before then ordering the Green Man to elaborate if he knows what's good for him. Lingering disbelief and pride whisper in the demon's ear to refuse, as he is the mighty King Piccolo, not a slave or pet to be commanded. But even amidst his ego, other whispers break through, warning him that this path is suicidal, since like it or not, this world indeed belongs to the Saiyan now. Choosing to quiet both voices with action, the king prepares a Magicin blast. A final thought crosses his mind, that of how effortlessly and dispassionately Bardock could wipe him out, even after taking all the Demon King had to offer. It is a chilling and sobering thought, which all but breaks his resolve to fight, and his mind along with it, as he finds his legs becoming wobbly while the Saiyan approaches him, the stark difference in their height no longer adding to his sense of superiority. As this happens, however, Bardock has a moment of hesitation, suddenly remembering if he lets off too much energy aggressively, he'll be sure to disturb his family's day at the park, and thus he too hesitates, with a moment proving enough to restore a mustard seed's worth of faith back in Piccolo, as he resolves himself to unleash his attack nonetheless. An instant later, the haunted house is blown into smithereens, with a shockwave racing throughout Superworld in a rather loud and obvious manner, one the likes Kine and the rest of the gang take fairly obvious notice of, and begin wondering what on earth that could have been, as it was bad enough that even the Ferris wheel itself shook back and is now even damaged and closed for repairs until further notice, forcing all patrons currently on it to make their way off it into another area of the park to find different attractions. Those amongst them adept in key sense know that it feels like Bardock and maybe someone else had been in that area a while ago, but now they don't really feel them, causing Kine to sigh and hope Bardock does get a chance to try the Ferris wheel out, as it seemed like the first thing he had any interest in here. Meanwhile, we find our hero doing just that, having already ended this battle in a single blow that knocked a thoroughly defeated Piccolo into one of the private cars of the ride. That is, if one could call conflict with someone you have more than 10,000 units of power an advantage over a battle, even with a thorough and humiliating defeat, and a more private venue to discuss things. After he wrecked their first, Piccolo refused to disclose anything about Kami's secret weapon, in the end, earning Bardock's respect, but irritating him further, as first, it was that magical food the Guardian used to heal others, and now this, with the accumulating secrets and conspiracies behind his back being something the Saiyan most certainly does not appreciate. However, in an attempt to prolong his life, the king is far more forthcoming about his connection to Kami, making sure to mention how killing him would mean a loss of the only weapon Bardock does know about in the Dragon Balls. Though he quickly comes to realize this is unneeded, when Bardock rather easily gives up on the interrogation, in order to instead procure his cigarettes from his pocket, taking a long pull, and even offering one, with mentions to the king that at the moment, this is probably the only smoking area around this place, while apologizing for roughing him up more than he had to in order to prove a point for Kami, as had he known this was a family feud, he'd have stayed out of it. And so he simply decides to let this all go, reasoning the old slug will let him in on things when he's good and ready, just like with his own past and secrets. Thanks to this mercy and his own natural healing, Piccolo begins to recover physically, albeit rather slowly, even eventually accepting Bardock's kindness, as they wind up enjoying the ride together as much as one can in this situation, thus actually giving Bardock a good chance to ask Piccolo to dime out more, like his past with Roshi and his master, and his works as a self-described terrifying conqueror, having gotten a sense from their little disagreement that the two of them weren't all too different after all. Though it's clear the former king doesn't actually like Bardock himself, so much as continued existence, so when their ride is ending, both prepare to go their separate ways. Piccolo, as to not be a demon discovered by the humans, and Bardock, so he is not stuck with the bill for the damage they've done. However, before they part, Bardock does ask what the self-professed Demon King has planned next, with Piccolo reluctantly relaying Kami's prize for winning, to which Bardock gruffly grins that while he can't offer him the world, he can offer him the same deal he has to Muesli and Devilman, to come along again and try and kill him sometime when he gets a bit too fed up with all the sunshine and rainbows of this peaceful world. Once the saying is gone, Piccolo finally allows himself to relax, realizing how lucky he'd gotten off, and how badly things could have gone had Bardock and Kami been only slightly more vindictive. Though loath to face the consequences of his wager, the Demon King opts to find a nice quiet place to think about all that's happened, manifesting a cloak to hide under, and following Bardock's lead and sneaking away back to an abandoned area of the park. Though being so wrapped up in his own situation, he fails to track the less than mastery movements of three mysterious figures who have been surveilling him since his arrival in the park. Meanwhile, back with the rest of the Songchun cereal clan, as Bardock is still absent and Gine and Muesli are ready for a chance to sit and relax, they finally agree to allow the boys to continue on exploring and enjoying the park on their own, the two elders and Granolah and Raditz being placed in charge before they dash off. With this comes the opportunity to go back and ride roller coasters with height limits that Kakarot's presence originally barred them from, meaning that it does not take very long at all for the younger Saiyan to be summarily ditched. Though, ever the adventurer, Goku doesn't let this get him down, instead simply continuing to run amok on his own until he finds a hall of mirrors, which quickly captures his attention thanks to all the funny versions of himself he sees thanks to distortions of the light, with a certain reflection even appearing not too unlike his father, as it makes him look all grown up. Though as he ventures deeper into the dark area, he hears the telltale sound of a scuffle, only to find a tall green man who looks a lot like Kami being ganged up on and restrained by a group of mysterious fighters, whom upon noticing the boy, let out a terrified squawk that it's him. Meanwhile, the likes of Raditz and Granolah finally disembark from the park's most popular roller coaster, known as the Steel Dragon 9000. Though much like Bardock had been earlier, they are pretty unimpressed, finally finding themselves bored of Superworld. However, the park does have one last terrible thrill in store for the boys, as quickly becomes clear that they have lost track of Goku, with neither the sensing of ki or use of super perceptive eyes being able to locate the youngest member of the family, with this causing a growing sense of dread at what may happen if their parents find out, only for Bark to choose this exact moment to return, appearing behind the boys and asking what they're up to and where everyone else is. As a pair of well-seasoned deceivers, the rivals band together with a bit of truth, in that their mothers allowed them to have free roam of the park while he was on the pot. This embarrassing cover story for his escapades aside, this doesn't fully satisfy the father's curiosity, with him narrowing his gaze on Raditz and asking him to elaborate on the elephant in the room that is Kakarot's absence, as he knows neither Gine or Muesli will want them separated around this crowded place. The duo then quickly offered the fib that he went off ahead of them to check out the haunted house and probably just ended up getting bored or scared in there, which Bardock pretty quickly calls Horsepookie on, via credible means he's not willing to disclose. And when asked why, he simply responds because he said so, before seriously ordering the boys to tell him what their final member is. Then with a slightly sinister smirk, he adds that if they don't want to tell him, maybe he'll ask their moms, since he can see them making their way through the crowd right now after all. This causes a sudden panic to fill Granolah and Raditz, seeing them all too quickly disclose to Bardock that in truth they have no idea, and can't even sense him, resulting in Bardock for the first time actually reaching out himself to confirm this, which both worries and irritates him to no end, as he instantly realizes the two in front of him must have ditched his youngest to go on a stupid ride. In a low but assertive tone, he prepares to lambast the duo, as he was already set to be in hot water in the first place before this mess. However, a possible divine savior speaks out with further bad news, as the voice of Kami rings out in the minds of all three alien warriors to inform them that Piccolo is also missing, whilst asking for their presence and aid on the lookout immediately, as their strength will likely be needed, and they seem to be in some kind of distress. Bluntly, Bardock responds this is an immediate no-go, as he's already done enough for the god on his day off. Plus, he now has to cover for these two knuckleheads. So put quite plainly, they're up now. Whilst the boys are mostly confused at who Kami is even talking about, as Bardock authoritatively orders them to go ahead and do as the Guardian told them to and report in. Reluctantly, yet thankful for an out to impending punishment at the hands of Bardock, the two suddenly leap high into the air before flaring their oars and blasting off together in a haste, disappearing out of sight, just as Gine and Muesli make their way to join Bardock with obvious questions as to what the hell is going on, putting the onus on him to now weave a tale of the pairs fighting and getting on Kakarot's nerves to the point of him deciding to go find somewhere else to hang out. And so now the two rivals are going to fight about it, obviously. This fairly believable story actually explains a few things to both, and it also makes it sound like Bardock had the chance to stop some of the squabbling but didn't feel like it. Typical Saiyan man. Adding that they were all supposed to have dinner at home tonight. Prepared as usual to bear the brunt of everyone's scorn, Bardock waves the women off, knowing this will only make them angry, assuring that the kids will be back by dinner as their appetites will guarantee it, and more importantly, it means they can finally get the hell out of this inane place and go have a drink at home. We now return to the cloaked trio from earlier, the likes of the so-called patrons of garlic, the most loyal and powerful of the evil spirits and demons that made up the rebellious army of the rightful god of this world. As they return to their master's demonic castle, they find themselves in high spirits, as thanks to the foresight and caution of their new leader, enforcing them to train, prepare, and overhaul their plans once having heard of the Earth's supposed new super strong warrior Bruce Chun, as well as rightly predicting that such an ally would cause Kami to become overconfident enough to lower his guard and present leverage against him. They were able to defeat King Piccolo and this new fabled monkey-tailed hero. In fact, both fell so easily at the hands of the Spice Boys that the malefic trio decided to go above and beyond their duty and capture both as tributes for their lord, which they now humbly present to their sire's heir, Garlic Jr. The Machian, while extremely satisfied beforehand thanks to the work of his underlings and the sheer natural boneheadedness of Kami's own, making the collection of the 7 Dragon Balls by the weaker spirits under his command pure child's play. However, now he is more so confused and miffed thanks to the balls not heeding his command, and his minions foolishly trying to think of their own, causing further complications, as now he has this shit to deal with, while their prisoners stir from unconsciousness, just as Ginger, Cinnamon, and Pepper recount their ruthless jumping of the would-be Demon King and young hero, with them not even showing fear of being captives, instead demanding and politely asking what's going on respective. Comedy then ensues when Piccolo's connection to Kami allows him to identify the child of Garlic derisively, just as he in turn screeches to be told what trickery has been used to lock the Dragon Balls from being accessed when all are gathered, which the demon vehemently refuses, as he chuckles and says that he both has no good reason to, or any desire to see his other half bested by the likes of such a whelp, regardless of how much contempt he holds for him, once again setting the Spice Boys into a chorus of cackles, as they tease that by now, the Green Man should know becoming one of Garlic Jr.'s underlings is best for him, as they've already beaten both he and Kami's champion Bruce Chun. Thus, all this pride is misplaced in the losing team, especially once Lord Garlic gets his wish for immortality. However, at this claim, the little spiky-haired boy breaks into a fit of giggle, along with the Demon King's growing laughter at the sheer stupidity of a plan to use the Dragon Balls after trying to take him out, whilst Goku finally understands his presence here is because of a mix-up between himself and his dad, probably because they were in that weird mirror hall. Thus, he winds up actually forgiving the henchman trio for their unfair fighting style, as he and his brothers have to team up just to take on his dad all the time. This in turn makes Garlic's eyes snap open in shock and embarrassment, as he instantly pieces together Goku's identity and a critical misstep in his scheme, noting that it's foolish, but thankfully incompetent minions have kidnapped the child of the most dangerous being on the planet rather than actually having engaged him in combat. Now the urgency to complete his wish is greater than ever before, with Garlic hastily offering the boy the position as his new second command, promising him wealth and power if he can continue being helpful and explain to him what's up with the Dragon Balls. Though he's not that interested in such stuff, honestly just wanting a snack since he's getting kinda hungry, Goku is not exactly one for keeping secrets, partially because he simply knows the information and is excited to be helpful, and inadvertently because he thinks if Raditz and Granolah were here, they'd probably just make fun of this shrimp for being too stupid to not know that there are 9 balls and 2 dragons now, which is probably why he can't get his wish yet. At once, everyone's jaws drop, as Garlic ignores the accidental insults and immediately sets things in a full motion, by commanding every single spirit under his control to rise up and scour the earth for the final 2 Dragon Balls by any means necessary, while the Spice Boys thank Kami that both themselves and the heroes are incompetent. And Piccolo admonishes Goku, bellowing to know what's wrong with these Saiyans, as the boy just helps someone more detestable than even himself, and beyond that, by revealing the existence of the second dragon, Garlic is less likely to value his and Kami's lives, with this causing Goku to tilt his head, still rather unintimidated by all this, as he asks who exactly Garlic is. However, it seems that Goku will not get his answer yet, as at that moment, the 2 prisoners are taken away to a garden of sorts, as a better holding area for now, with something quickly coming along to draw his attention away from the Slugman, that being a bounty of ripe and delicious looking apples. Meanwhile, thanks to pushing against the air at top speed, Raditz and Granolah had made pretty great time into the lookout, with Kami in turn helping them find Goku and his kidnappers using his godly gaze. However, that is not the only surprise they're in for, as when they arrive, they find Minato standing tall and strong, in a younger and healthier state than Granolah has ever encountered. However, the Namekians wave this off as news for later, instead warning the boys about the spirits currently plaguing the world, and charging them to make their way to the domain of their master, explaining Kami's past in depth with a lot more openness now thanks to his time spent with his own brethren in order to convey the gist and important parts to the boys, making sure they know what they're getting into in order to rescue son Goku, since they won't have their father with them, not to mention so they can explain the situation and their actions today to Bardock as well, since having watched that battle and the subsequent conversation with King Piccolo, they are certain the same will be less than happy with them. At the same time, back on Mount Pause, Bardock continues stalling for time by insisting that the feud between the boys this time was really something, or trying to desperately distract from the topic of what's really going on, by offering his aid in tidying up or prepping dinner, even though he still can't cook very well. Figuring that he can't do much damage with the feather duster, Ine sets her mate to clean the bedrooms, though this proves a misapprehension, as at that moment, one of Garlic Jr.'s evil spirits sneaks his way into the house to steal Grandpa Gohan's 4-star Dragon Ball, and thus he winds up wrecking the room rather than cleaning it, whilst failing to keep the treasure secure in the process of driving the Spectre away. Following a dressing down about being mindful of his own strength in a fragile human world, Bardock is quickly relegated to watching TV with Grandpa Gohan, or going outside until dinner. Unfortunately, once he attempts to do the latter, figuring some shadowboxing might get his mind off everything, he notices the skies have turned a rather foreboding voting something big is happening shade of red. And so he shuts the door and pretends not to see, flopping onto the couch and sitting with Gohan, where they then flip to a news report about darklings, ghouls, and monsters running amok. The absurdity of the claim attracting Moose's attention, forcing Bardock to flip the channel to the cartoon robot girl the boys are always watching, while playing it off as lines from some schlocky horror movie he thinks. All the while internally hoping Grandma Paozu and Roshi's balls weren't swiped as well, and wondering what in the hell the boys are wrapped up in, with only the tiniest bit of growing worry. Though thinking back on the last time he rushed to their aid and embarrassed them, he intends to let them handle it. Little does he know, Kakarot's way of handling things has inadvertently seen Garlic Jr. collect the Dragon Ball, and without any form of fanfare, summon Shinron and Sarumba to complete his scheme, wasting no time at all of the twin dragons, and even cutting them off as they attempt to introduce themselves and their roles, by demanding he be made immortal, leaving no room for anyone to even interject, as the dragons simply heed the command whilst waiting for the second wish. Having thought about it for only a short time, the Machian can think of no better furthering of his gift than the ability to grow stronger should he be overcome, making him both endless and inevitable. For a moment, the dragons paused, as if in counsel with one another, debating whether or not such a request counts as an act of destruction and balance to the prior wish for eternal life. However, in the end, as is their duty and pleasure to grant that which is within their power, the eyes of Shinron and Sarumba flare once again, with what can only be described as reluctant pity and gleeful mischief respectively, as Garlic's body is set alight with even further power from the dragon magic affecting him. In tandem, the legendary serpents then bid him farewell, with a flash transformed back into 9 separate streaks of light, which dart out around the earth, just in time, as another flash heralds the arrival of 4 warriors whom oppose this so-called unstoppable Garlic Jr. Having already worked out a game plan, Granolah and Raditz demand Goku be returned to them, while Monaito stands beside Kami to take Jr. down like his father before him. Seeing the two groups split up, as thanks to having 2 stronger prisoners to watch over, the Spice Boys don't make their way out to meet them at their initial charge. Instead, having reason they can stay in the main hall, beating down on the defiant Piccolo until he relents, since the boy surely isn't in any state to fight back now. Hearing this upsets both alien boys, seeing them instantly leap into action to defend Piccolo as a secondary goal, with the first being to knock the lies out of these guys' mouths. And so prepared for battle, they burst forth in tandem and sock Ginger and Cinnamon away, which makes an opening for the Demon King to take strength and unity, stretching his own arm for an uppercut so Pepper isn't left out, sending all 3 crashing through a couple of castle walls and into the garden where the boys meet to follow them. However, Piccolo instead blasts a hole clean through the ceiling, flying out of it at top speed in order to achieve payback on Garlic Jr. as he appears behind the little imp, making it clear he has no escape from the trio of Namekians now surrounding him, though instead of seeming scared of his much larger foes, vowing to personally show Piccolo and Kami their rightful places worshipping the ground he walks on as a true demon and god. Meanwhile, as Granolah and Raditz leave after their targets, all the while dismissing the fact they've actually been the ones dished this time, they are shocked to find their 3 minions all still ready to go, and surrounding Goku with ki blasts at the ready, while ordering them to surrender, or else take this brat home as ashes. This indeed causes the older boys to hesitate, but it's more so in shock as they recognize something is very off about Goku, and when he greets them in a ditzy and slurred way, their fear of his being inebriated is confirmed, with him recommending they not eat too many of those fruit, since they aren't really apples. Once again, the Spice Boys are unable to take things completely seriously, especially when they have so much leverage, and so they burst out into another cacophony of giggles, though these are cut off as the air around them shifts, thanks to the boys in front of them suddenly becoming deadly serious, as Raditz makes certain Granolah is aware they'll definitely be dead meat if they bring Kakarot back like this, which the Moss Head confirms he's well aware of, so they may as well turn these guys into worm food first, the killing intent in their aura appearing far too potent and tangible for children so young. Though, even more shocking is how unexpected and dangerous a drunken Saiyan child proves to be, as when the villains try to blast Goku to prove their ruthlessness, he simply lurches out of the way, exclaiming excitedly to his brothers that he wanted to tell them he got his tail back, as he's easily able to snake it around Cinnamon's leg to tug it out from under him, messing his balance and ki blast up so it detonates in Pepper's face, and causes him to accidentally smack Ginger's a ways away. This bit of slapstick shows matchups that are naturally made for all 3 boys, with Raditz wanting to take on who appears to be the biggest and toughest, Granolah the furthest and speediest, and Goku the one who seems the silliest. Obviously aggravated to be glorified babysitters, the patrons of Garlic finally get serious, and against mere children of all things, bulking up to their full power to wipe them out. Thanks to being embarrassed by this little brat, Cinnamon produces a huge sword from his own body, and begins to try and slice the tiny hero down to something more bite-sized, while Goku innocently hiccups and slurs his speech, continuing to use the movements of drunken boxing, and Roshi's other teachings to avoid these swipes and slashes, and complaining this isn't fair, as he can't pull weapons out of his body, causing the demon to suggest he'll show him how if he stops being scared and stays still. Though this, however, gives Goku an idea, as he suddenly allows himself to be slashed seemingly, only to repeat his trick from against Ox King in order to latch onto his opponent's attack, and thus avoid it by becoming a part of it. Unfortunately, the challenger pretending to be a sword serves to upset his already angry tummy so bad that he turns green and threatens to puke on his attacker if he's not careful. But even more importantly, it reminds Goku that he has his own weapons, seeing him call out for the Nimbus to come to him and bring the power pole with it, forcing him to hold out just long enough for the magical magical Kentoon to appear with his grandpa's trusty weapon, allowing him to even the playing field. Or so it seems, as with the magic weapon in hand, Goku has it extend with full power, driving the demonic fighter out of the castle for good. While with another slight hiccup, Goku mumbles that he hopes he didn't hurt that funny guy too bad, and then he finally vomits. At the same time, Granolah begins to unleash a volley of keyboards with precise and deadly aim, but thanks to Ginger's light frame and agile movements, he proves no slouch in dancing around these as best he can. And what he's sure he can't endure or avoid, he decides to slice through as using a similar ability to Cinnamon. He excretes 2 blades from his body, which allow him to deflect and cut through Granolah's blast while closing in on him quickly. As the two face off, Ginger decides to get Granolah acquainted with its twin scimitars, flexing his strength and dexterity with the 2 extensions of his body that only serve to further his large advantage in reach. While in contrast, Granolah produces the dagger Master Tao had gifted him, with this earning laughter, mockery, and scorn, as Ginger grins that his is bigger, and he has 2! Nonetheless, Granolah spits in disgust that these guys are real sickos, and shows his knife and martial arts skills are more than a match for this demonic swordsman, as all swipes, slashes, and stabs are redirected or perfectly parried to the point of his blades being the ones that take on damage, while Granolah's remains in pristine condition, as he smirks that size and numbers don't matter. Case in point, this big brute is getting his ass kicked by a kid. Enraged by this, Ginger bulks his body up even further beyond with his remaining power, growling that he'll show this torpid big brute. Though smirking with the shades of Tao to his face, Granolah smugly thanks him for the demonstration, promising to pay him back by showing him a corpse. Letting out a bestial bellow, Ginger then surges his ki into his blades for a ki-powered cross-chop, while the Cerulean valiantly pits his speed against Garlic's patron in order to stop this technique, allowing him to actually catch the blades between his index and middle finger, just at the apex of the arc of the swing before it's unleashed, only for Ginger to uncaringly snap the tips of his blades off, in order to still slash Granolah's arms unexpectedly, nearly severing vital muscles, with this even incapacitating him temporarily. However, in doing so, Ginger makes a fatal mistake, leaving the job unfinished, as even down the use of his arm, Granolah gloats he can patch himself up from this, but Ginger can't say the same for what's about to happen to him, as despite the fact it means certain death, the boy continues to approach him, and then disappears, only for Ginger to suddenly feel himself being flipped over before a loud crack rings out. Desperately, the demon attempts to look around to locate the culprit, now panicked, as he was caught off guard right when he was going for the kill. However, he realizes all too late his neck is no longer under his own will to operate, as the green-haired boy simply jumped onto his shoulders at high speed in order to use his legs as a vice, meaning it was not his body that was flipped, but his neck and head, a full 180 degrees, allowing him to see his own body before he dies, just as Granolah had said, therefore ending their fight in a relatively subtle but undeniable fatality. As Granolah lands with his kill and begins bandaging its arms with a part of his scarf. Though ever the perfectionist, he immediately begins brooding about the mistakes he made as sloppy and not up to the standards of his masters. Finally, being aware of the cool ways in which his brothers defeated their mooks, Raditz attempts to defeat Pepper in an even more flashy manner, offering him his hand in a true man's fight with no tricks or key techniques, just pure power in their fists. Certain he can win this, Pepper agrees, offering to shake Raditz's left hand with his right, so he can slug this runt to death with his killer left. Though as he winds up, he realizes Raditz's free hand isn't balled into a fist. Instead, his fingers are blatantly crossed in plain view, but the trap had already been set, as he subsequently shows off his own brute strength, pulling his opponent closer to eye level before bellowing in his face to activate his Big Blast Sonic technique, which produces the destructive wave of ki that incinerates Pepper, leaving nothing behind but the hand Raditz shook, as he can't help but laugh at how incompetent these guys were, while tossing it away casually, a bit more satisfied by his scrap than usual, as this is the most Saiyan-like task they've had since coming to Earth. Then without warning, the castle shakes once more, as another hole is blown through its roof when 3 bodies are flung through it violently, those being the Namekians, all looking worse for wear, as Monito places his hands on the Guardian and his other half in order to use some of his remaining energy to heal them, whilst coughing and spluttering that this is what he meant by not being able to win on their own, or at least without fighting as one. However, whatever act he hopes Kami and Piccolo will perform in order to win, they continue to vehemently refuse, leaving Garlic time to lower himself down in a very audacious manner, while preparing and firing a large ki blast to finish them all off, now that he has his wishes. But the chance doesn't come, as the 3 brats from earlier move in perfect sync, zooming in front of their incapacitated green friends to help them easily deflect this, while having them get back to safety. Looking around, and realizing in a very opposite turn of events from his own, his current strongest minions have well and truly all been trumped by these little whelps. The tiny immortal warrior himself steps forward to jeers from all 3 boys, as they seem eager to bully a jerk much smaller than themselves. Well, excluding Goku, who had sobered up a good bit, and just doesn't like that this guy cut his day at the park short. Beyond that, while being strong, Garlic certainly isn't unstoppable for the 3 of them together, considering exactly who it is they've trained to defeat in situations like this. Though that is only using what the Machian calls a very limited metric of strength, as he demonstrates the true nature of his abilities by converting all his magic into raw physical power, allowing him to bulk up much like his minions, and now tower over the sons of Bruce Chun, which makes the situation all the more familiar to them. Recognizing they asked for this, the trio scatter as Garlic strikes and breaks up the ground they had all been standing on, the force of it kicking up debris, with enough force to negate Granola's counter shots and Raditz's rain of blows, with only Goku's jabbing of the power pole into the big brute's toes proving effective, as it also creates an opportunity to extend it and fly into the air, where you can send those big chunks of rock and debris shooting back at Garlic like baseballs, just like Yamcha showed him, subsequently making openings for Granolah and Raditz to land their own successful attacks and a building rhythm. The cooperation between three brotherly rivals, proving a match for Super Garlic Jr. as a joint force. This emboldens the trio of aliens, as they find themselves able to sync up with ease and cover for one another more than they ever could when taking on Bardock. A truly astounding feat considering their time in different martial arts schools, but as naturally as they took to playing on Mount Pauzi, they began to combo and even create new moves together, such as tricking Garlic at Goku's suggestion. So when he thinks there are only 3 forms of the John Kenpo he has to memorize, he's in for a rude awakening when Granolah shows him the secret 4th form and shoot. One underhanded tactic by Raditz is all about knocking the brutish Machian prone, so the 3 of them can simply stomp him out regardless of the disparity in size, and regardless of power. A coordinated raining down of their heels is quite devastating. They then try to top it with an ultimate combo of skills that nearly topples the immortal Garlic then and there, as Raditz rolls and attacks like a madman, only to be blocked by Garlic's left arm, mirroring Granolah shooting a ki blast volley to little effect, as Garlic's right hand can block this, only for these techniques to be revealed as mere decoys to keep his eyes off Goku's speedy approach from the middle, as he leaps after planting the power pole in his crazy monkey form, while Granolah and Raditz team up to land tandem axe kicks that shoot Granola's chin straight down to the magic weapon of Son Gohan, just as it extends with enough force to not only send Goku shooting into the opponent's midsection with tremendous force, but also keep taking him up, and away, as he's launched from the ceiling of his castle and out of sight by the power pole, much like Cinnamon had been. This devastating combo buys the boys a moment of reprieve, and by now, it's needed, as without one another, none of them could stand up to Garlic Jr. once he returns moments later, stronger than before, and in an effort to protect one another, each give 3 times the effort to make sure they all come out of this okay. Even so, Garlic proves this is not enough, with the resounding force of his deadly death impact, speeding back and blitzing the boys after returning fire with a powerful ki burst spear, which he uses to corral them, so like the Namekians, he can swat all 3 flies with one massive full power haymaker. This in turn becomes the cycle of the brutal beatdown from the once not so big bad boss. Nonetheless, these 3 gutsy boys stand back up, not because Garlic's blow wasn't bone shattering and resolve breaking, with each recognizing they are now sporting pretty serious injuries, but because each also has 2 brothers counting on them during this fight, and one father they refuse to disappoint by being taken down here. However, this does little to concern Garlic, as his victory conditions have long since been achieved. So even though he just can't seem to smear one of these brats across the floor because the other 2 constantly buzzing around and raging, it's abundantly clear this trio, while mighty, will not win this war of attrition. However, as it turns out, these 4 are soon to not be the only participants, as having sensed Garlic's ki when the massive combo move broke his veil spell, as well as the fact that dinner is getting cold and he's receiving angry glares, Bardock now prepares to speed across the planet as quick as he can, only for Kami and Monaito to tell him to wait, warning that Garlic still has something up his sleeve, though disregarding the old slug says he's still pissy with them. The Saiyan bursts onto the scene, just in time to knock Garlic away just before he can attack the boys again. Reveling a bit in their awe, he shows up like the big hero. As for Garlic, he is lucky to keep his head attached to his shoulders, as this one blow is enough to activate his immortality and repair the damage he's accumulated. While tearing himself from the wall, he leers that this must be the storied figure Bruce Chun, though this just earns him a scoff from the Saiyan, as he corrects the mistake with his alias while producing a cigarette and lighting it along with his full-powered aura, just to make sure he doesn't have to repeat this. He is the one responsible for these kids, and since the imp chose to hurt them, it looks like he's also Garlic Jr.'s bloody end. Hearing this isn't as disturbing as seeing and sensing it for Garlic. Not a threat, but a natural law. This man is doing little more than showing the same loyalty to family, and in his case, filial piety, that has driven the Machian all this time, and that terrifies him, resulting in an abrupt change of strategy, as before Bardock can follow up, Garlic reverts to his base form, using his small size to dart away and back towards the recovering boys, leering that he may not be able to win today, but he can win centuries from now, as he quickly reveals his trump card and opens up the dead zone, planning to take his weaker enemies inside the dimensional prison alongside it, so he can finish them off on his own terms, and then escape when he's sure Bruce Chun is old and decrepit, using his blessings from the dragons. In this case, Garlic's targets are Kami and the children, with him leaving behind a blast in order to destroy the castle and cover his tracks for good measure, since by his own admission, he's a sore loser, which means the board must be wiped clean. As the castle falls and they're separated from their allies, this leaves behind a furious Bardock and Mr. Popo, who in the end still acted a mere instant too late, and so lament their failure. The guardians are tender in his own lack of agency, and the father for his own sloth and ignorance to avoid problems, as he notes every time he does so, he only creates more for better or worse, and this time, it is the absolute worst case scenario. However, Mr. Popo suddenly points Bardock's attention to something moving underneath more rubble of Garlic's castle, a sight which offers both further shock and a small chance to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Meanwhile, inside the dead zone, though the situation is terrifying, Kami and the heroes don't lose heart, banding close together in order to try and recuperate and regroup, though thankfully Garlic, feeling he has ample time, chooses to spend the first portion of his torturer's revenge revenge, gloating and declaring his intention for the god of Earth to be the last to die after watching all the horrible things he has planned for these brats, and asking if he regrets taking what was rightfully his father's now. To which Kami bravely and plainly says no, clarifying that Garlic has won nothing but the ability to lose endlessly, with Raditz backing the old Namek up with gusto, as he declares that Saiyans get stronger the closer to death they get, so making a fight in a place called the Dead Zone is probably gonna make Kakarot and him crazy strong, with the younger Saiyan getting excited enough by this to ask if it's true, to which Granolah, of course, denies it is dragon droppings, getting the other two to focus and form up with Kami, as it's time to begin a possibly perpetual and pointless clash at the moment of their deaths. However, before the two sides can do battle, the entire Dead Zone shakes noticeably, with Garlic freezing in bewilderment, having never encountered such a thing, with him even looking to the other four beings inhabiting the massive void with him, as if to ask if they did that, though their shock self-evidently means they hadn't. Regardless, this means he needs to tie these loose ends up ASAP and plot his next step, though the chance never comes, as between he and his targets a finger splashes into existence, like someone is forcing their way into the Dead Zone as easily as one swims. This thought passing just as Bardock emerges torso first and breaks into Garlic's last-ditch effort to create an impenetrable domain, a manic, murderous grin on his face, as his Saiyan blood can't help but boil in excited anticipation, as he sees fear grip Garlic Jr., realizing there is simply nowhere he can hide from this retribution. Placing his hands at the edges of the opening, he's bored. Bardock tears it open wider, causing the shaking to intensify enough that Garlic Jr. has trouble maintaining balance and is forced to bulk back up into his super form, all while Bardock pulls the rest of his body inside and keeps the portal open, ordering Kami and the boys out of the Dead Zone now. Wasting no time with questioning or bickering, the four aliens charge out of the horrible purgatory with haste, emerging to find Monito and Piccolo as their saviors. Their final act before the castle collapse having been to go after them, in order to use every last bit of their power to hold the Dead Zone open just a crack, if only for one more instant, with this being all that was needed for Bardock to do what he does best, and turn the tides. As the group of four escape, the young Namekian's power finally waned, causing the crude tear in reality to begin sealing back up, with Bardock's allies yelling for him to hurry on through as well, though with a smirk and lazy salute, the scarred Saiyan assures them all there's no need to worry, before allowing himself to be trapped seemingly forever. What follows is a heavy stunned silence, as all recognize how valuable a hero the Earth has lost. Despite his flaws, the man had become kind, benevolent, merciful, and selfless. At least, this is what everyone thinks, until the Dead Zone opens right back up less than a minute later, as Bardock strolls out clutching a very thoroughly beaten, bloodied, and humiliated Garlic Jr. by his head, now that he's back to being a shrimp in his defeat, while almost wishing he weren't immortal, as now he'll be forced to endure the pain of his wounds. It's an old trick for dealing with cocky upstart Saiyans with big heads because of their Zenkai boost, though after Garlic started sobbing and stopped giving him even a semblance of a fight, Bardock had lost all interest in him, only bringing him out to shame him, before flippantly tossing the runty immortal back into his own Dead Zone prison, with a dire warning as to what will happen should he try this again before it closes. And just like that, the forces of Garlic Jr. and his Dead Zone are thoroughly defeated, resulting in the world returning to normal as our heroes all regroup. As Guardian, Kami is immensely grateful to and proud of the forces the Earth now boasts, this experience instilling a greater sense of faith and trust in Bardock and his kin than Monito's influence alone ever could. While on the other side, Piccolo was rather bashful and embarrassed about his part in all this, going so far as to deny his actions in helping Monito as non-selfish ones before turning to leave. That is until he feels a hand on his shoulder, as Monito states that he hasn't forgotten that Piccolo lost their bet, meaning he's coming back to live on the lookout with them, before he once more hails Bardock as a hero, but much more proudly says he is glad the title now rests upon the shoulders of Granolah and the Saiyan's children as well, encouraging them to come and celebrate the occasion with them, as the three green men join Mr. Popo on his carpet and disappear. With the incredible adventure over, Bardock stretches and yawns a bit, grumbling that this whole excursion was so much trouble, and it's only going to get worse if they don't book it back to Mount Paozu. However, before they take off, Goku stops him suddenly, remembering something and reaching into his gi to reveal one of the apples from Garlic's garden that he kept on him, though it's now horribly bruised from the fights. A bit disgusted, but still supportive, Bardock accepts the souvenir while asking what it is, with Granolah this time deciding to skip trying to lie to Bardock by coming clean about what happened. Even the Saiyans to rather calmly agree it's best they don't tell their mothers about any of this, but especially that drunk Kakarot part, as he takes a bite of the alcoholic treat. Though as he chews and screws his face up in a funny way, the boys ask how it is, and in all honesty, it's way too sweet for Bardock's liking. That's it for part 9 in our first Z movie, cementing us in that era of this story technically, even if we're super early. How'd you feel about King Piccolo and Garlic here? Were they threatening enough? Would you like seeing them given another shot in the villain role? How do you feel about canonically weaker foes being aware of the gap in power between themselves and the fam and trying to fill it? How crazy do you think things will get trying to manage the movies and main timeline events in one campaign? What's your favorite line that I flubbed in the script? Let me know down below and be sure not to miss the next part. Shoutouts as always to friends like Piccolo for help with scripting, Val and Mr. Negative for visuals, and of course to our supporters of the day, John, Cody Keene, Benny Montoya, Indigo Saturn 64, Kier Skywalker, and Jester DeMille. Remember to take care of yourselves and the world around you, and have a good one.